Okay, it's time to talk about Wrexham. Now, Wrexham are a club which appears to divide fans drastically, and it all seems to come down to this line of how do you see football and what kind of football fan are you? If you're a traditional fan that sees football in a very, English style, that you don't like the idea of foreign owners from overseas, especially those from America, coming to your country and spending a ton of money, then the idea of Wrexham becoming the club that they have and rising through the leagues, you may not like at all. But if you're someone that's not really involved and you're not like from a team from League 1, League 2 and National League, then you probably just don't care too much. And you may actually find it cool, the idea of a new club with people that you may actually know, that has players that you may know, come through the ranks and get back-to-back promotions. Now, back-to-back promotions is a very hard thing to do. It's not impossible, but what Wrexham has done here, but even from my perspective, what Wrexham has achieved here is, I don't know if you could call it a fairy tale story. It is to people from Wrexham. If you're a fan of Wrexham and you've actually gone to the games for Wrexham in League 2 or National League in those years when they were just a normal club, if you are a fan, you are from Wrexham, of course it's a fairy tale story. It's like saying to Manchester City fans before they were bought out by the Abu Dhabi ownership that they won't be able to enjoy their success because they got public money into it. Of course not. They're still going to enjoy it, and to them, winning the treble is still a fairy tale story. Those that was at Main Road or was there in Division 2 when they were at the playoff final back in the late 90s, those fans, it is still a fairy tale. And in the videos I did prior, when I talked about Wrexham, it was about the topic of jealousy. The reason why they're not liked, the idea of a football club that shows more of becoming more of a Netflix documentary, a Netflix show than an actual football club, which, I mean, it's part of it, and that, of course, is a big part of its appeal to a much more, general audience that isn't that into football. Clubs at its level, League 2, League 1, National League, even some Premier League clubs would kill for this type of fan base. So comment down below where do you stand with Wrexham and their success. Like, subscribe, and Mazzola Designs for the best football prints, all made by myself. Use code Vizeh for 15% off all items. But here we are. Wrexham are in the Championship. They're in the second tier. They are one step away from the Premier League, and it is not impossible to believe they will be in the Premier League in the next 2 to 3 years. It's not impossible to think that if their trajectory and the way they seem to operate seems to indicate things, they seem to always get players that's from the tier above down to their level. Now, the big difference is there's a big gap between the Premier League and the Championship to the Championship, League 1, League 2 and so on and so forth. But, Ipswich Town did back-to-back promotions from League 1 to Championship and up to Premier League, but it was a different circumstance. And even, let's say, Luton Town, they came from back-to-back promotions from League 2 to League 1 to Championship, and then it took them only 3 years in Championship to get into the playoffs. The reason why I'm saying this is that it appears to look like they're already looking at bringing in some players with some Premier League pedigree down to the Championship to play for Wrexham next year, either on loan or players that are maybe a bit on of age that may join them for a season or two. The likes of Jamie Vardy has been linked immensely to Wrexham. But let's be honest here, the idea of Wrexham actually being promoted again is almost a near impossibility when you compare all the other League 1 teams that's been promoted in recent years. I can't see a world where they're even in top 12, in the top half, never mind, in the top 6. These are the new sides, did all stay up, Oxford, Portsmouth and also Derby County, but narrowly they were always in the conversation other than maybe Portsmouth the entire time. And then, of course, Plymouth Argyle eventually went down in the end. And when you look at Wrexham's team here, 9 players in their entire squad has never even played in the Championship before. So they'll be looking at loan signings, players at Premier League clubs that, because of their squad and the talent that they have, won't really get too much game time. So coming into Championship, getting a decent wage and, having some good development will be important for them. This has happened many times and it's a big part of how teams even go up now. You got Emmanuel Solomon from Spurs to Leeds United last year, Jadon Anthony from Bournemouth to Burnley, Howard Bellis, of course, came from City to Burnley, and then, of course, was signed to Southampton as well. So that market is going to be key for them, and of course players that are near the end of the career as well, like Patrick Bamford or Tom Kearney, and of course Jamie Vardy. These players have already been heavily linked, but it could be a case of they're just too obvious names that would always be linked in the first place. And yeah, Wrexham may have some money in comparison to the National League or League 2. However, compared to the Championship, it's a different kettle of fish. Many clubs Championship have far bigger budgets, plus also a few clubs have parachute payments. Their main goal should be survival next year. But I do want to ask this question though, if you are a Wrexham fan, maybe from America, do you just watch them because of a documentary on Disney Plus? It can't be that, right? Or like, because you like the idea of being part of something. I think that's a big part of it, like the idea of being part of something that you think is kind of cool. It's almost like a story that you'll see from some film or some movie or something, right? There's like this underdog story that came from nowhere, from nothing, that could potentially become something big. It's like Wrexham, the way that I see it, is almost a sort of like perfect footballing metaphor for like the American dream, where like anyone can be anything if given the right resources and hard work and grit and whatever else. I feel like it comes across like that. And yes, I know I'm going to get comments like the last one saying, hey, but Ryan Reynolds is actually Canadian, so it doesn't actually make any sense. Well, you know what, mate, shut up. You get the idea, okay, please. Of course, if you're someone from England, from the National League, whatever, yeah, I do believe there was a good portion of jealousy there, you know, and League 2 club or League 1 club, where a lot of media, a lot of attention has gone to Wrexham because they've got, of course, just a massive audience in America and overseas, and even in parts of the country as well, in the UK. So I can see why there's also some jealousy there, where, for example, you will see many articles about Wrexham being promoted into the Championship, even so about Birmingham. But you won't see many really talk about Charlton, for example. And that kind of was a story of when teams were promoted from League 2 with Wrexham in, and you heard about Wrexham in League 1, but not much more about the other clubs. And it makes sense, right? I'm sure the same thing can be said about me, of like, well, I'm doing another video about Wrexham. I've done 3 videos in 2 years or however long it's been. And like, hey, well, you've not done a video about, you know, Crawley or Swindon or Morecambe or Crewe. Like, I'm part of the problem, but am I gonna get views for doing stuff about Morecambe or Crewe or Accrington Stanley? You know, like in the same way of why I do a video about Wrexham, because I think it's more interesting. It's the same reason why all these media companies also do posts and articles about Wrexham, because more people find it interesting. It is an interesting story. I mean, my opinion of Wrexham always stayed the same, with owners at clubs that we all point at and say, how has this ever been allowed to happen? We look at with Reading, with, of course, now Dye has now finally left the club, with Sheffield Wednesday, with Scunthorpe, with Southend, with multiple clubs that's gone under and have had awful ownership and awfully run clubs. We always say about how awful it is and how it's ever happened. But now we've got a club here with owners that is putting their money in their pocket, is involved in the community, is actually boosting the football club, and is doing everything positive possible I could possibly find that could be benefit a football club, and it's now a bad thing. You know, like, we can't have it both ways. We can't have it where clubs we look at and say, oh, how has this been ever how can this ever happen? That these owners are, you know, they don't know what they're doing and they don't care about the club, they don't care about the people, they don't put their money in the club. And then when someone does the absolute opposite of that and they do everything they can to help the club, it's now a bad thing. But why? Because they got a show on Disney Plus? Or is it because of the idea of them buying the league having an unfair advantage because clubs in that tier typically don't have the money or finances to do so, or the resources, or the links? Things will change. Of course, Paul Mullen, for example, has been a massive part of their club for the last 3-4 years now, and this year that just happened, he's only scored 3 goals in 26 games. So eventually these players that they've got, which of course were 2 good leagues below, they are upgrading year by year. So many players they have will have to leave, and if that's possible or not, if to find out. So you imagine that their clauses will go up, that they will have some higher wages by being in a higher league. So we're going to see how easy it is to actually get players out to then go bring players in. So all in all, how I feel about it is that no matter kind of where you stand with it, it's still kind of cool to see. And it is an achievement no matter how you stretch it, no matter how much money you think they spent or how unfair it is, to get back-to-back promotions is still impressive. I'm interested to see how they do next year. If you're asking me, I think they'll stay up somewhat comfortably, similar to how I think Portsmouth did it last year. I think they'll be staying around the kind of 15th to 17th area, 14th to 17th. That's the kind of zone I'll be putting them in for next year. I think they could stay up. I think they could. I don't think there's a reason why they can't. So, yeah, keep it up, boys. See you next time.